right. Well, it's a nice sunny night in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, as we start our second show. I'm here with Chris, Mr. Haney Fletcher, Gary, the double knot spy Kin, and I'm Dave, the skipper Finoli. How you guys doing tonight?
I don't know. Getting ready to talk about Pittsburgh sports, maybe?
Yeah, either that or you have a double knot adventure, Jethro?
Me personally, I'm going to be a soda jerk. Oh, I know.
What do you know? What do you know? Oh, Mr. Haney, he had it all.
Of course, you'll be wanting to record this, Dave.
Oh, he's a classic. He's a classic. Oh, but tonight, gentlemen, we're going to talk about, I was watching a little video about great stadiums. And, of course, our wonderful stadium that we kind of grew up in, Gary, when you came to Duquesne, Fletch and I, as we grew up in the area,
Yep.
Three River Stadium, an area that gets abused because of its cookie-cutter style. Nothing too prevalent. It didn't have the greatest food in the world, at least till the end, unless you want to call the steamed hot dog in the bin that they would bring to you, a great experience. But stadiums aren't about the look. They're not about, I mean, PNC Park is considered the best baseball stadium in the area, but you know what? I'd rather a team win in Three River Stadium than what we've seen over the last 19 years at PNC Park. So, I mean, to me, Three River Stadium is just a special place. So special that the three of us have written a book about it, as we're getting on the 50th anniversary of the stadium. The Association of Pittsburgh Pittsburgh journalists, excuse me. We're doing that through the History Press, be available end of October, early November. And the fun of it was just reliving some of those days. Reliving some of those events. So we're going to talk a little about that tonight. I'll start off with one of my great memories there. As we grew up in the 70s, we thought the Steeler championships were just going to continue.
Mm-hmm.
Thought the 80s were going to be special, one for the thumb in 1980. Well, that didn't happen till 25 years later. But I remember after losing in 1994 to San Diego, being in that place against a heavily underdog Indianapolis team, seeing the team go down 16-13, Indianapolis with the ball, driving, seemingly another disastrous upset when Willie Williams knocks the ball out of Warren's hand. He didn't knock the ball out of his hand. He stopped them on a fourth down, which would look like an easy first down. Knocked him down, forced him to punt. And then, of course, Neil O'Donnell proceeds to throw the ball into Quentin Coriott's hands, which Ernie Mills out of the blue comes out and knocks it out of his hand.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Bam Moore scores with over a minute left, and then the dramatic ending, which I didn't think was a controversy because I saw the referee clearly wave it off. But apparently, if you were watching it on TV, you were nervous as hell.
You were nervous.
Waiting for that. Yeah. It was just one of the great goosebump moments. I stood in the stadium for probably a good 45 minutes to an hour after the game, just enjoying everything that was going on, sitting back, seeing what we had missed out on over the previous 15 years, and what a joy that was. Same was at my freshman year at Duquesne during Game 3 of the NLCS. Cincinnati, let's face it, we were their bitches. Beat us in 70, beat us in 72, beat us in 74. 75. Dodgers beat us in 74.
Right.
And, we played two close, tight, extra inning games in Cincinnati, winning both. But this one was a celebration. It was a rout. After 4 innings, it was 6-0. Madlock and Stargell hit homers. Stargell has a 2-run double. Blyleven, who would end up being pissed because Chuck Tanner never let him complete games. Had an 8-hit complete game that day. 7-1. In a year that you never thought you were going to see again, well, we got to see it. And just the joy of celebrating that. Again, a team that we thought was going to win again and have a shot at a World Series the next year. As we look with the gray in our hairs and beards, we're still waiting for that moment. Almost 40 years later. Well, damn, 40 years later. What do you mean almost? 40 years later.
Yep.
I remember in 74, the great draft the Steelers had. 4 Hall of Famers in the first 5 picks, but it was Joe Gilliam on opening day, who had just taken over as quarterback, the first African-American to quarterback a team in an opening day situation to open the season. And with the team up 3-0 throws, I'm sitting in the end zone, the opposite end zone to where the Steelers were going at the time, right on top of the scoreboard. And just remember what a perfect 54-yard pass he threw into Lynn Swan's hands. Lynn Swan's first touchdown as a professional, and Joe Gilliam led him with 254 yards, I believe, 257 that day to a 30-0 win. And you just thought he was going to be special. Threw over 300 the next week, 354 against the Broncos when it was rare to do so. Only to see him just turn around and have a miserable next few games and get pulled even though they were 4-1-1. But it made Terry Bradshaw a better quarterback waiting in my eyes. And probably my greatest memory there, other than the 95 game or even with it, was watching Pitt in 1976 face off against Penn State. They had not beaten Penn State since Joe Paterno had taken over, 10, 11 years. You've heard about my stories of Uncle Ed and my father hating traffic and leaving early.
Yes.
Well, I went to the game with my Uncle Paul. Uncle Paul was the vast opposite. He didn't mind staying to the game and for the traffic, but he never got there at the beginning of the game. We pulled to the stadium midway in the first quarter. Penn State is up 7-0. So I got to miss that, which I guess in retrospect is okay. Better than leaving the Immaculate Reception game. But Johnny Majors made one of the great moves, who I'm excitedly going to meet for the first time at the Monroeville Convention Center on Saturday.
Yeah.
But he makes the move to put Dorsett to fullback. Paterno doesn't know how to deal with that, and Dorsett runs for 224 yards, including a 40-yard touchdown. After being behind 7-0, they scored 24 consecutive points, and just what a glorious night that was. Finished the season 11-0. They have no trouble against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl to win a national championship 43 years ago. How tough you realize it is for a national championship to win one, and just having that experience was just phenomenal. Fletch, I know you've had some great experiences in there.
Well, a lot of mine revolve around family too. 1971, in the book, I was lucky enough to draw that chapter, and really I talk about that being not only the first full year of Three River Stadium, but it's my first full year as a baseball fan. And I got to go to World Series Game 3, first World Series game played at Three River Stadium, and I went with my grandfather, and it was an amazing day. The Galletti family.
That was an amazing chapter, by the way.
Oh, thank you. The Galletti family, they weren't drivers into Pittsburgh. It was sort of like Columbus or the explorers crossing the ocean. It was 45 minutes, but you would think there was all kinds of hazards along the way. So we catch the bus in Ambridge. We go to the game. We sit there, and it was a great game. And my uncle the following year took me to see the Immaculate Reception game. So again, family being really, really big for part of this. Other memories, Dave, you and I have talked about this before. If you're a game is on the line situation where your life depends on it, what pitcher are you starting?
What pitcher I'm starting with? I'm starting Bob Gibson.
Bob Gibson.
Yeah.
And I was there for the 1971 World no-hitter that he pitched.
Oh, wow.
An 11-0 whitewashing of the Pirates. And, even from my seat in the right field, because I had to be by Clemente, that's just how it worked. You could just see the determination. on that guy's face and the body language. And, you know, he was getting up there in years, but he still had it that day, and it was just a magical moment. You know, I think of a really sad day in 1973 when the Pirates take the field and you find Manny Sanguin playing right field instead of the great Roberto Clemente. That was a sad moment. I think I was at the 74 All-Star game. Ken Brett, the only Pirate representative, but the MVP of that game was a guy who made the team as a write-in, and that was Steve Garvey, that was a pretty amazing game too. Those great Steeler teams, what can you say about them? But I think the game that I most think about is that 1978 AFC Championship game with that horrendous weather that was there, and they absolutely kicked the living shit out of the Houston Oilers that day. They could have played that game 20 times, and Houston would never have won any single one of those games. It was just maybe the most dominant.
17 points in the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was the most dominant game that I've ever seen them play. Going off of sports, 1994, I saw the Grateful Dead in one of their last shows. They played their Rusted Root opening for them. I was doing a story on Rusted Root, so I was hanging out backstage and got to meet Jerry Garcia, got to see a lot of that band. It rained like hell that day, but it was I'd never seen a Grateful Dead show before, and I've only heard about them, and just the fans, it was like a traveling circus there. It was amazing how the people were following them. And then there's those not so great moments. 1995, I was a partial season ticket holder to one of the worst Pirate teams I can remember. And it just seemed that every time I went to a game, that fat-ass Jimmy Anderson was pitching. I don't know how I managed it, but it was like it would rain 2 days in a row before that just so that Jimmy when I was there. It was incredible. But one night in August of 95, it was a very special moment. Paul Wagner, who was probably the worst pitcher in the league at the time, he was leading the league in losses, came one strike away from a no. And it was sort of like this whole microcosm of the Pirates season that year, because he's a 3-2 count on Andres Galarraga, who's not a fast man, guys. They called him the big cat. They should have called him the fat cat, because he was not – there's nothing cat-like agility with this man. He beats out an infield single to rob him of a no-hitter. Had he won that game, had he pitched the no-hitter, it would have been the only no-hitter pitched by someone with that kind of record. I think he was 3-13 at the time.
Yeah.
I kid about Jimmy Anderson. I tried to get a nickname to stick to him. I tried to get him to get the nickname of Etta, because it looked like he ate a lot of things before he And Dave, I got one too. I was with you for that final Steeler game that was played there.
Yeah.
Just seeing them bring back all those legends, that was just a wonderful moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my last thing, I want to give a shout out to your wife, Viv, who grabbed the Three Rivers chairs that I have in my game room over here and built them so that I have a piece of Three Rivers here in this game room.
See, we have the reverse marriage. She's good with the tools. I'm good with the cooking.
There you go.
Yeah, she has mine downstairs too. So we will give a shout out. But those are some great memories. Now, Gary, I know yours are kind of compacted into a shorter period of time, but
and they're not all live. They're not all live.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm envious, and I told people this. I've told people about this about hockey. Like if you're lucky enough to live in Pittsburgh, you've seen an awful lot of great stuff. Three Rivers especially, but I mean, just in general. I mean, for a town of its size, it's had plenty of losing, but it's also had plenty of stellar things. I mean, the things that jump out at me are some stuff that I remember. Starting with a lot of television, and then a couple when I was there. I remember in 1971. That was probably my first full season as well. I had seen some Oriole games and been gone to see the Phillies. I actually saw the Pirates in 1970 in Philadelphia. But that was such a great World Series from top to bottom. Both those teams were great teams. It was a World Series of shifting tides. And I remember, Three Rivers. I was not bothered by those big cookie cutters. I didn't dislike them as much as a lot of other people did. I mean, you were miles away in the outfield and up high, but down low, the place is rocked. They did here in Philadelphia. They did in Pittsburgh. And I wasn't bothered by that. But I remember, Three Rivers was an interesting place because the team was so good and that World Series was so good. But the ones that jump out at me are a little bit unusual, and they're not all live. But I remember Candelaria's no-hitter Monday night in 1976 against a very good Dodger team. That Dodger team had gone to the World Series in 74. It had lost to the Reds in 75 and 76. But it was a very good team still. Steve Garvey, Fletch mentioned earlier, Ron Say, Davey Lopes, and Candelaria was just unhittable that night. Unfortunately, as usual, there wasn't many people there. I think it was about 9,900 people. Game was over in 1 hour and 45 minutes. How much would we like that today? Yeah. So, I mean, I just remember that night he looked like the second coming of something. I mean, you just couldn't touch him. The 1992 Pirates team to me was the one. They were all. I love that era, and I was watching it from 330 miles away. Got to go to a few games each of those years, but the 1992 team had a lot of issues, and Leland had a lot to deal with. Mm-hmm. You had Alex Cole in the outfield who could run like hell, but he couldn't hit at all. King didn't really start coming on, Jeff King, till later in the year. They really, they didn't have a tremendous bullpen. They had that, but that was the year where they stuck Tim Wakefield in there. They weren't the best team in baseball like they were the year before, but they still won 96 games, and they ran away in September again. And Bonds and Van Slyke were just amazing. But the thing I remember was the end of it. They killed the Mets. I think it was like 18 or 19-2 on the Saturday. And then on the Sunday, it was a tight game, but they won it 4-2. I think Belinda was out there. And I think they had carried Leland off one of the previous years, but it was Bonds and McClendon who carried him off. You don't see that in baseball very often.
No, you don't.
And there was that team, just to me, Leland had to really manage. That team came from behind a lot that year. And I guess in my mind, I just felt that there was no way the Braves were going to have the same luck that they had in 1991. And no way would Steve Avery look like the second coming of a 6'5" Sandy Koufax. But unfortunately, we all know what happened. But that year I was pretty juiced, and I really thought they were going to win it that year after all the adversity went through and how good of a job Leland did. But that final game that year really stuck with me. The other one that stuck with me, again from afar, was the last game, the 10-9 loss to the Cubs. Willie was not in good shape. He came out in the field. You could see he wasn't long for things. Yeah. I think it was Sanguillen and Doc Ellis were out there initially, I think. I think I probably got the game on ESPN, or maybe I was buying the package at that time. But
they were there.
Doc had his problems, but, he was glad to be back there. Of course, Sanguillen's an icon out there still. That game was like something out of a movie. I mean, it was a back-and-forth game with a long-term rival like the Cubs going back to the Chance and Clark, battles 100 years ago. And sure as hell doesn't Wainer hit the last homer, and he's up there with the 2 winning runs in the bottom of the ninth. They got all those base runners, Vanderwall, and I remember, and I think it was Kendall and Giles got base hits. It was a storybook. Unfortunately, it wasn't a storybook because he grounded out to third. Yeah. But it was a great game. It was a great ending. I remember how quiet it was at the end. There was 55,000 people there, which you hardly ever saw, even in some of the World Series and playoff games. But, I guess it was just the finale, how quick it went. I remember thinking, 1970, 71, I remember watching them play on TV in a brand new Three Rivers with all the blue outfield walls and everything. Here it was. My life went by pretty quick too. I remember thinking, and that game stuck with me. Yeah. One odd one that stuck with me was the Pittsburgh Maulers opening. I was lucky enough. I was out there at that time. I was a senior. I guess you were probably gone, Dave. I guess, Fletch, we were seniors.
Yeah, I was freezing out there.
It was.
That was the coldest thing I can ever remember.
It was sunny, but it was freezing.
Yeah.
And I remember Cliff Stout was on the other side. And, he took a lot of beating. I mean, he wasn't a great quarterback, but he took a lot of beating from the fans. And he had a poor game, too. And 50-some thousand were there. I mean, it was a pretty exciting thing, only from the standpoint of a lot of us could never get a Steeler ticket. Mm-hmm. If we didn't have family or we didn't have friends that could get a Steeler ticket, we couldn't get it, so we could get there. And, even though they lost that game, it was an entertaining night. It was something very unusual. So after that, they never drew more than, I think it's 25,000 for the rest of the season. But that first day was an exciting day that I remember.
It was, and one of our writing mates, Tom Rooney, who details that season in the book. He was one of the front office guys for the Ballers during that season, and it's a hilarious chapter to read. He ends up getting traded to the Baltimore Stars, but we'll let you guys read about his, because apparently, and I never knew this, the Baltimore Stars were the part of the Pittsburgh Maulers. Apparently, they merged them into that championship team. So in a way, the Maulers ended up winning a title.
I mean, the Maulers had Carano had a couple good years for the Cowboys. Had one great Thanksgiving Day game, I remember. I think Rozier was good. He was a little banged up by the time.
That was the problem.
He was damn good. He was fast. He was a hard runner. And Clancy was on that team too. Sam was a damn good football player. So, they had some appeal. And I could never figure out, is that purple or blue, the goofy colors of the uniform and stuff like that. You couldn't always tell. But beyond that, that first day was kind of an exciting time. And there was a lot of excitement about the USFL at that time. Didn't quite end up that way, as we all know. But, no shameless plug for the book. But one game that sticks out to me, which is what I wrote about, Dave, in the book.
Yeah.
When I first got to Pittsburgh, I didn't really know a lot of people. There was a couple guys from my high school that went there, but I wasn't close with them. And one of the reasons I decided to go to Pittsburgh, beyond the fact that Duquesne was a good school and they gave me some money, was how good 1979 was.
Yeah.
I remember that was just such a fun season. They were a fun team. They weren't great defensively. Hit the ball all over the place. Sister Sledge and the song and Willie and stuff. And that was a factor in me going out there. And then when I realized when I visited how close the stadium was to Duquesne, you could actually walk it. It was one final trigger for me. But the last weekend of the season, and again, not a shameless plug, but the last weekend of the season, the Pirates fell hopelessly out of it that September. I remember there was a huge amount of disappointment out there. They just fell apart after Labor Day. They were in the race on Labor Day, and it completely fell apart. And, there's a lot of reasons for it looking back. But I went to a game the last weekend of the season because I had bought tickets when I first got out to school against the Cubs on a Friday night. Freezing cold night again. Nobody was there. They announced it as 5,200. If it was half that, I would eat my hat. It must have been so different than the prior year. So that sticks with me. That was one of the few times I went to something out there.
Great chapter.
I remember thinking, how great must 1979 have been, and how dreary is this situation? And, it was a bad night. Candelaria, ironically, came in and relief, something I think he only did 4 or 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
Game kind of ended. Everybody walked off, and I thought, wow, how different than 12 months ago. They honestly played the Cubs the last weekend, had some crazy games to clinch it. But, that was one that sticks with me. It's certainly not the most memorable. It's not touching some of the, emotions you guys touch. But for me, it was really an eye-opener, how it must have been year to year.
Well, it was good, and you pretty much nailed it when you as you wrote about it. It was a good look in what was a disappointing season for both the Pirates and the Steelers. I mean,
yeah,
the Steelers got old that year.
They did.
And again, we did not see that coming. But one of the other strange memories of Three Rivers was, I think it was the first Frazier Ali fight. They did the closed circuit there.
Oh,
and there was an incredible wind that blew the screen. So you had a lot of pissed off fans there. But I'm using this as a segue into Gary's boxing report and MMA report for this week. How'd you like that?
Very good.
Was that a smooth one?
Very nice.
But anyways, one quick thing. The book will be on sale at the end of October, early November. It will be done by the History Press, and it's something we're all proud of. And a percentage of the royalties will be going to the Chet Cooper Foundation, who is probably the single icon at Duquesne University, who has become its second member in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, which he'll be inducted for this year.
Outstanding.
So, well deserved. But Gary, bring us some boxing of this week.
I'm going to start out with one quote from Richard Hoffer. If you guys remember him, he used to write for Sports Illustrated. He was a great writer. And his line had, I think, in the boxing part of combat sports, gentlemen, has become more and more true every day. Boxing is the sport that treats its fans, its loyal fans, the worst. The heavyweight division had some momentum last December with some pretty good fighters, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, who's an American heavyweight again, something everybody seems to insist on, which I don't necessarily agree with. Anthony Joshua, a very charismatic, big British heavyweight. 6'6", 250 pounds of solid muscle, well-spoken. Everybody thought this would be one of those periods that we saw, whether it was Tyson Holyfield or Ali Norton in the 70s. And, of course, so much money today, networks today, everything else, none of those guys are going to fight each other. They've all gone with different promoters and different networks. Looks very unlikely they're going to fight each other anytime soon. So we go back to Richard Hoffer's quote. But every now and then we get it right. I also want to have one thing we got to say for those listeners who like boxing. Howard Letterman passed away a couple days ago, who was the HBO boxing judge. He was only 79. It was obvious something wasn't right because although HBO was tailing off the last 4 or 5 years, that was the prize network in boxing for many, many years, 30 years. Everybody knew his high-pitched voice, his absolute love of boxing. He was probably the best on TV at explaining things like ring generalship and hard, effective punching and explaining pro boxing versus amateur boxing, and he absolutely loved the sport. I was fortunate enough, here's where I'm lucky, living in the East near Atlantic City. After a number of big fights for over a 20-year period, Howard would always be in the bars afterwards along with some of the fighters, and he would talk to anybody. He would discuss boxing with you for 20 minutes, even though you were a nobody, because he was completely passionate about it. You know, sometimes he would even remember your name. Bright guy who, you know, just loved the sport. Can't lose guys like that. Eventually they're going to pass on. Larry Merchant was that way as a commentator, although a lot of people don't like his sour. We don't see Larry anymore. But I got to say that, first of all. You got to identify a guy like that if we're going to talk about boxing.
Hey, Gary?
Yes.
For me, watching the fights, I would always compare myself to how Letterman was scoring it. And if I'm in agreement with him, I knew I was on the right track.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he really assisted those HBO broadcasts far more than people gave him credit for. Lampley could be a little pompous, great caller, excited about the sport too. Roy Jones, a great analyst, you know, struggled sometimes with his pronunciation of things, but Letterman did a lot for explaining boxing to the casual follower. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they get it right. Last weekend there were two tremendous cards on the same weekend. Something we don't see very much in boxing, and I'll be quick, Dave. Jared Hurd is one of the fighters. There's a lot of safety first today. You know, the fight that was publicized big time on DAZN by Canelo Alvarez and Danny Jacobs was, again, another disappointment for the fans who bought DAZN. Both those guys are tremendous fighters. I do know, and we all know, as you get higher in the skill level, sometimes the fight can be a little bit boring because the skills are too good and the defense is too good. But there's also a safety first aspect to this now that we see too much. In my view, Alvarez and Jacobs both took the safety first route. They're looking at the future paydays down the road. There's other reasons for it, but that cannot help the sport in any way, you know, particularly in the world we're in with all the other competition, even on the MMA side. But last weekend, Jared Hurd is a come-forward fighter. He had been injured for a while. It was on Fox as well. He got upset by a guy named Julian Williams, who had been knocked out by Jamal Charlo about a year and a half ago. Everybody thought he was on the downside, but in a tremendous back-and-forth fight, and one the judges got right, a unanimous decision for Williams. Hurd lost. But in a loss, he was glorious because he kept coming. And over 2.1 million people watch this. So, again, I throw out, nobody cares about boxing. 2.1 million watch it on a weekend where you have pro basketball, Stanley Cup playoffs, all kinds of other things going on, and 2.1 million people tune in.
Now, was this on their website?
This was on Fox. This was on Fox Sports.
Okay.
On the same night, ESPN had a card with fighters that were fairly unknown to those people who aren't junkies about boxing. But the super bantamweight fight between Isaac Dogbe from Ghana and Emmanuel Navarrete was a rematch, something that happened quickly, which we don't often see these days. Navarrete won the first time. Similar to what you often hear, he won the second time, a little bit easier, but it was a good back-and-forth fight with Navarrete stopping Dogbe finally in the 11th. And then later that night, in another rematch, although that rematch initially was a better fight, between Miguel Berchelt and Francisco Vargas, two all-action come-forward fighters. This time Berchelt stopped Vargas earlier, but it was a damn good fight with a lot of action for 6 rounds. So boxing got it right. One thing about the night, though, I have started to pay attention to the MMA just because I like combat sports. Brazil is the Canastota, what Canastota is to boxing and what Cooperstown is to baseball, Canton is to football. A lot of the MMA and the jiu-jitsu and all that stuff comes from Brazil. So they have a card in Brazil. It's loaded with a bunch of fighters, some of their icons. Anderson Silva, who reigned as a middleweight champion in that, for 7 years, almost unheard of in the sport. He loses. Another guy, Jose Aldo, is a featherweight. He loses. Everybody's losing. Finally, in the main event, in a women's fight, which I don't really love that much, but the Brazilian fighter wins. Ironically, in another MMA card in Chicago, Illinois, there's 2 Brazilian fighters that are underdogs. Michael Page, who's out of Britain, a very good athletic guy, fighting a guy by the name of Douglas Lima. Lima's a huge underdog. He knocks Page out in the second round. A guy named Patricio Freire, a big underdog against an American out of Florida by the name of Michael Chandler. He knocks Chandler out in the first round, although a little controversial. So in Brazil's homeland, all the upsets happen against them. But in Chicago, Illinois, where people probably don't even tie the two together, the 2 Brazilian fighters pull huge upsets. So it's a great night for combat sports, a great weekend this past weekend.
Well, it sounds it, and I know you're a lover of the Boxing Hall of Fame, as you mentioned a little earlier. Here's the list of who's coming to its 30th anniversary. Mickey Ward, Ernie Shavers, who you style yourself after, Fletch. They're going to get Mark Breland is there, Leon Spinks, Michael Spinks, Larry Hazard, Burnett Whitaker, and the Magic Man, Antonio Tarver, are on the list of people that are going to be there. So that's going to be a heck of an event. Up in, what's it called,
Canastota, New York, outside of Syracuse, about 20 miles northeast of Syracuse, on the thruway.
All right. So that's a good night.
One thing I'll add is that is something that if you like boxing, or all of us if we like boxing, it is. I've gone to that event 3 or 4 times. A lot of people pouring into a small town, but a very well-run event, and you really do get a lot of time to interact with those guys. Nicely done by Ed Brophy, who runs the boxing. Boxers are happy for any attention, unlike some other professional athletes.
Well, it was good, and I was one of the 2.1 million watching on Fox, so it was some good fights. So, now, Fletch, you seem in a conciliatory mood tonight, not necessarily a bitter one.
Well, guys, I'm going to dedicate this segment to the band Nirvana, and I'm calling it All Apologies. Dave, my first apology is to you. For all these years making fun of your nose, I was insensitive, and, I'm sorry. Gary, more than once I've called you a heartless bastard. Not the case. So while I'm at it, I'm going to throw another one out there, and that one's to be going to Kawhi Leonard. I always had him pegged as overrated, and I was wrong. And again, I'm sorry. Here's a guy who, unlike a lot of his compatriots, shuns social media. He lets his play do the talking. And when you're in Toronto, which is basically a big-ass black hole in the NBA, and you're able to be successful and carry that team, deserves some credit. I mean, I knew he was good, but in the series against the Sixers, he showed his value, and he carried that team, especially in Game 7. We could talk for hours about his game-winning shot. The first buzzer beater ever in a Game 7. In an
amazing stat.
Isn't that just –
It is an amazing stat.
That's amazing. It really is amazing.
And just the way it happened, too. I mean, it reminded me of that Christian Laettner shot a little bit. Because he takes the pass. Most people, that's a catch and release, But he dribbles to the corner, lets it fly with a guy on top of him. And just to even add to the drama, it bounces, 3 times?
4.
You remember the Don Nesson thing in 1970 against, I believe, the Lakers, if I'm not mistaken. Same kind of bounce.
It was just, it just only hyped that moment even more. Leonard's good. He's really good, and I apologize to him. My other apology is going to go out to Josh Bell. Coming into the season, I wasn't big on him. He had a solid rookie year. He had 27 homers. He was starting to get a feel for first base after spending most of his time in the minors and in the outfield. But then came that dreaded sophomore slump. And, guys, he was not good last year. I mean, his power numbers just fell off the table. He had 12 homers. Fiddling with his swing, whether it was him, whether it was the team. He was tentative at the plate. He just wasn't driving the ball. So I'm happy to issue this apology. Josh Bell appears to be in beast mode this year. He's already cracked 10 homers. He's second among all first basemen in that category. And he's also among the leaders in OPS, RBIs, slugging percentage for first baseman. And that's a power position, let's face it.
And they're not just homers.
Is pretty amazing.
Those are amazing numbers he hit.
Yeah, and the ball's exploding off his bat. I know how much you guys both love that exit velocity stat, but he's among the league leaders in that as well. And he hit a ball against the Cardinals the other day. It was an absolute, I'm going to use my Dr. Evil laser thing, and it just I didn't know it was going to get out because it was hit so hard. I didn't know it was going to be high enough.
Yeah.
But and let's put his performance in perspective this far. I mean, he's basically the only offensive threat that this team has right now.
That's what I was going to say. He's got no protection. There's not a lot around him.
And without him, there's no way they're sniffing 500.
No.
He's mashing the ball with no protection. And he's not – this is a guy who's a defensive liability, but he's not. I mean, if you've seen him this year, he's really done a hell of a job digging some of those balls out of the dirt. He made a play the other night where he had a diving stop at first base that was just he looked like he was very comfortable there. And here's another thing to keep in mind, guys. What if I say 1982 to you, what does that mean? Well, besides the fact we were all playboys at Duquesne at that time.
1982.
82.
It was a lousy year.
That was the last time that the Pirates had an all-star first baseman.
Really?
This position has been the black hole of this team for all these years. Think about it. You had guys like John Jaso. You had Mark Johnson, Brian Hunter, Adam LaRoche, who basically started to hit maybe in August.
Yeah, struck out all the time. Yeah.
Randall Simon, he of the Sausage Gate in Milwaukee, and Jose Hernandez. And this is a veritable who's not who. But boys, I'm telling you, the streak ends this year with Josh Bell. He's going to earn a spot on the squad. He's on a 40 home run pace right now. More importantly, he's become the most dependable Pirate this year.
Now, Willie was the last at 40 in 73. Is that, am I remembering correctly?
I would think.
I think that's the last one.
Who was the 82 guy, Fletch? Who was the 82?
Jason Thompson.
I was going to say Thompson.
The man who could clog the base paths with his lack of speed.
Yeah, he was slow. But that Pirate team that year really started to fall off. Then we started going to that black hole in 82.
Yeah. Yep. I'll tell you what, I was watching Seinfeld today, and I'm so into exit velocity that as Keith Hernandez was spitting the magic loogie, I timed it out at 13.8 miles per hour, which for him is pretty damn good, I would think.
That's one magic loogie, as they would say.
It was. Today is the anniversary of the last Seinfeld, by the way.
Is it really? How about that?
What a disappointing final.
I guess that's true when you think
about it. That was a horrible final episode for everything so good about that series. That was probably the worst. It was no Newhart, which was the best. I don't know if you remember that. Where Bob
woke up, didn't he? Didn't he wake up? Yeah, he woke up with her in bed. It was all a dream, wasn't it?
It was.
Newhart, yeah. That was a great ending. It was.
Well, let me tell you, while you're conciliatory, Mr. Fletcher, I'm a little bitter in my weekly event. I'm thinking the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
And I'm not bitter about what happened. I'm bitter about what it showed about the sports columnist. We're going to say columnist here because some of them just so outrageously wrote such stupid things in the effort to try to be controversial that it just made you wonder, why the hell are we even reading this?
Yep.
I looked at it today. I went frame by frame of it just to make sure. I wanted to be fresh about it because what I saw in the first place was a foul, as I recall. So I looked at it frame by frame. He shoots off. War of Will was about to take over and had some momentum. Lost about 5 or 6 lengths at that point. Yes, the horse was spooked and went over, but it's still a foul.
It is a foul.
It is, as the rules.
So he knocks him off, who runs into Long Range Toddy, which is one of the great names in history.
It is.
who knocks into number 21, ironically, number 21, Bod Express, who knocks into Country Horse. And some idiot even had the thought, they took a picture of all the horses jammed together, trying to claim they all fouled, which when you look at it, it was a domino effect after he cut out.
Right.
This is a foul. This is not instant replay. This is not the New Orleans pass interference controversy. These rules have been in place as long as I've been watching horse racing, which is in the early 70s. And I know it's been on before that. This was a foul. It was a clear foul.
Totally agree.
It could have been a disastrous thing had one horse fallen because of that. So Maximum Security did not deserve the win. So we'll start with that. Then, and I don't mean this as political, but it's an ass statement nonetheless, because as people get irritated sometimes at athletes talking about politics, I get irritated when politicians stupidly talk about sports. The president gets up and tries to compare this to only happening because of political correctness. Now, to me, political correctness would be to give Maximum Security the win because you don't want to hurt his feelings, the poor horse's feelings, for accidentally going in line. That would be political correctness. To use the rules that are in force to kick Maximum Security out of the race makes you sound like a horse's ass when you make such a statement.
Clearly.
So
Clearly.
Dave, here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
I don't want to risk the wrath of Mom on the Right with this one.
Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
Just say I'm not in this one because, my goal in this whole show thing is to get that autographed picture of Mom on the Right. So I'm not going to go down this pathway with you. I'm leaving this conversation right now.
Okay. But could you tell me what that tweet would have made the president?
Pretty much.
Pusher of the week.
Right.
Pusher of the week, exactly. Now, this is, and anytime you hear commentaries or written editorials that start out with, let me start by the fact I don't know much about horse racing. At that point, stop. You don't know what the hell you're talking about at that point.
That's right.
Amen, brother.
You're done. I mean, trying to compare this to the evils of instant replay, the evils of the pass interference call. You're being an ass.
Baloney.
You don't deserve your job at that point if this is what you're doing. It's ridiculous. It was the right call, and the right horse won. Don't jump in front of the other horses. The owner bitches. Yes. Okay. Too many horses in the field. He's right. Okay? There were too many horses in the field. But that had nothing to do with this. He was in the lead. He wasn't fighting away from somebody. That had nothing to do with the foul. The horse got spooked. Just shut up. Right foul. The reason it took 22 minutes was no other purpose than these people were afraid of these assholes of what they were about to say. They were afraid of making that call, but to their credit, they made it. And the other bonehead thing is bitching because they didn't allow these judges to be put in front of the press. What are you going to say to them? They explain to you why. There's no reason for them to be in front of the press except for you to try to humiliate them. That was the purpose of why you wanted them in front of the press. So, again, just a ridiculous thing. I'm sorry it happened that way. Yes, he was the best horse, but he fouled. He fouled in what could have been a very, very dangerous moment in Kentucky Derby history. So, deserved what he got.
Can I add a couple things to this too, Dave? I thought about this too. I didn't do the same level of research you did about it because I guess, Fletch, you don't have to apologize to me. I am kind of a bitter, whatever you call me. You're right, Dave. If you say I'm not going to go out and start commenting on golf because I don't know anything about golf. I got to rely on Chris for that, or maybe you, Dave. I listen. I learn something by listening, but I'm not going to go out and be a golf commentator. I don't know anything about it. I don't know the history. I don't know the difficulty. It's just not my. So don't be talking about horse racing. I don't want to hear it. Get some horse racing experts on there. This is not car racing. There's millions of dollars invested in these animals. Okay, you can't have people cutting it out like a NASCAR race. Those are the rules. Sorry. That's it. And I think the one thing one of the handlers said was true. It isn't just that you won by doing it. there's so much money bet on these things, particularly something like the Kentucky Derby or the Preakness. Even from people who know nothing about horse racing and could care less about it, are plowing tons of millions of dollars into a business that's got its issues. You know, you can't have this. They made the right call. Sorry. I don't care if you like it or not. I don't care what your opinions are. Those are facts from Trump on down. It's got nothing to do with political correctness.
And it doesn't, because if Nancy Pelosi made a comment, I'd call her what, Fletch? Nancy Pelosi would be the Busher of the week, and she'd be deserving it. So it's not a political comment, just a personal thing that irritates the hell out of me. But go ahead.
My last point about this is I hate people jumping on stuff. Maybe it's because a couple things I like, but the point I made about the 2.1 million on Fox watching Jarrett Hurd and Julian Williams. You ask the average sports fan on the street, who are these two guys who wouldn't know who it is? 2.1 million people tuned in on a busy weekend, busy time of the year. Same thing with horse racing. Oh, this business is awful. They're shooting these horses up with stuff. Quiet. I don't need to hear it. Then don't watch it. Okay? Then do whatever you're going to do. This is a glorious sport with a glorious history. Leave it be. I'm sorry that somebody was disqualified for the first time in 144 years. It was nothing more than the right call. When they asked the jockey, when the woman who rides up to talk to the jockeys, he was not over exuberant. He knew there was going to be a challenge because he knew that he kind of veered it out. You can't always control – a 126-pound man can't control a 2,000-pound horse. But it does happen, and sometimes that's the rules, and things don't always go your way. So, Dave, I'm completely in agreement with you, man.
Cool.
I'm completely there.
Very good. And getting back to boxing real quick, on HBO tonight, there's a great of a two-part documentary on Ali in his words.
Mm-hmm.
LeBron James is the producer of that.
Absolutely. So, and by the way, the Cavaliers have gotten the 5th pick in the draft. We haven't found out who's number 1 yet.
Lakers are still in it, buddy boy. They got that 2% chance.
All right. Good luck. So, Mr. Fletcher, what is going to be your incredible prediction of the week?
Well, guys, it's PGA Championship time at Bethpage Black, and I know it's one of your favorite courses, Dave. I remember you saying to me one time, once you go Bethpage Black, you never go back. So, the Masters, everyone is back on the Tiger bandwagon. And you know what, guys? I'm on it too, and I'll tell you why. He's leading the tour in greens and regulation this year. He's doing it at about a 75% rate. And in the majors, guys, we know how important that is. So I'm thinking the Tiger's going to win and move 2 behind Jack in terms of overall wins in majors. My top 4 for the weekend, Woods, Dustin Johnson, Ricky Fowler, and my surprise pick is Bryson DeChambeau.
Okay. He's played well. And
that's not just because I like to say his name.
Great name. Yeah.
It is.
Because of it, though.
Great name.
He plays with distance and accuracy, and that's what you need at the PGA. My only concern is Ricky Fowler's inability to bend the damn bill on his cap.
That's why I don't want to see it win.
Yeah.
It irritates me. I don't want to see it win because of that.
It's that millennial hat. Yeah,
but the bend. His caddy should just run up, grab it, knock it off his head, bend it, and hand it back to him. That, my friends, is a good caddy.
It is a fabulous porn stash, too.
It is.
Johnny Wadd would be incredibly happy with it. But that hat makes him what? What does the hat make him? Put it down. Do your damn curve. Do the curve. That should be exciting stuff. And I think if Tiger approaches Jack at this point in time, that would be the story of a lifetime if he can tie and break Nicklaus's record after his.
After that, I never thought it would happen.
No, I never thought he'd be close. I never thought he'd win a tournament, much less a major. But incredible.
My knowledge of this is certainly rudimentary, but it just seems to me, with as crowded as the Iowa State and all this stuff, him playing well and winning that thing, and he continues to play, that's got to be great for golf. That's got to be great for attention, viewership, TV revenue, everything, even live gate revenue. I mean, you want him to be playing. He's like Mike Tyson or he's like LeBron James. You want him to be a prominent figure. So
absolutely.
I'm kind of rooting for that too, just for the sport, because it's good for the sport overall.
Absolutely. Well, what do you got, Gary? What do you got in your prediction? I know
mine aren't as detailed as that. I think we haven't talked about a lot of hockey lately, and in a year that's been just, I don't think I went back and looked at the hockey news day before the playoffs started, and they're not even close. They had one team in there. I think they had the Bruins in there. Although I'm a little bit surprised they didn't have the Sharks, because although he's not the same anymore, when they picked up Erik Karlsson and you put him with Brent Burns, and you put him with a pretty damn good group of forwards that nobody really talks about because they play in the San Francisco metropolitan area, hardly ever see them in the East. Sharks are a good team. It's a better team than played the Penguins a couple years ago. When you look at it, it's a far better team. It's got Evander Kane. It's got Karlsson. It's got a couple of kids that are really good. I'm surprised that people didn't give them their due. I thought they would play the Caps when we would talk about this before on our podcast, but clearly I was wrong. But it's now looking, and I know they're playing, I think it's tonight, but the Bruins are looking awful good. They're big and physical. Nobody likes them, and I understand it. I mean, it's hard to like a guy like Chara or even Marchand, but Rask is playing extremely well. So I think the upsets are probably over. So my prediction is I think both these series, even though St. Louis won game 2, I just don't know how well they're going to match up with the Sharks over the course of the series, particularly if Pavelski's back and healthy. I kind of like both of those teams to move on. I think they both could be over in 5 or 6 games. I don't think they're going the route. So I think it's going to end up being a final that's not that unpredictable after the chaos that happened the first 5 weeks. And I think the last one is a boxing one. A lot of people don't like Deontay Wilder, and I can understand that personality-wise. He's got plenty of flaws, but he is willing to fight. He's fighting a guy by the name of Dominic Breazeale this week, who's a former football player. We're getting a lot of these guys. Heavyweight fights still draw attention. I think Wilder wins fairly easy, probably 5 or 6 rounds, and that'll probably be it for Breazeale. So those are my 2 predictions. Not that exciting, but that's what I could come up with.
Yeah, good predictions. Good predictions.
What you got, Big Daddy?
Well, I'm first going to say I made the call last time that Liverpool was going to beat Barcelona. Didn't look too good. When you go down 3-0 in the Champions League quarter and semis, you have 2-game aggregate in goals. Okay, so it's like one long big-ass game.
Yeah.
Down 3-0 against one of the great teams in the world. Spain has probably the greatest league in the world, their first division. And it was a hopeless venture. There was no way. I came home from work at halftime that game. Liverpool was up 1-0, but there's no way that they give up. The Pelicans get number 1.
They do.
The Knicks get 2 and 3 in the draft. So the Pelicans will be Zion's home. But anyways, so there's no way they come back in the second half. You don't score 2 goals against this team. Not only do they score 2, they score 3. And if you get a chance on YouTube, type in Liverpool announcers, because this is one.
It's going crazy.
Oh, it's one of the great Homer moments of all time. The color man basically says 2 words the whole time in the spirit of Major League with Bob Uecker's color man in the movie Major League. But they come back and they win 4-3 to beat them. To beat them as we call. And they're going, they lost a disappointing Premier League season to Man City, who it's found that there's something called play fair, which is a salary cap that they did illegally. Okay. They were very legal, going to still win the title. But Europe is a bigger title than the Premier League. These guys, the Champions League is a bigger title. And if you are a Tottenham fan, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to cry. You're going to whine like a little baby. Okay? Show me how to whine like a little baby, Gary. Show me right now.
I've never been a baby, son. How do babies
whine? Come on. Just say whine. Exactly. You're going to cry like a baby. And I'm going to come on here next week because it's not till July 1st, June 1st. Which I might be in Cape May, so you might have to drag your ass up to Cape May to watch a soccer game for the first time you're like there.
We'll get the beers and we'll do it. I think it'll be fun. So.
But I'm going to tell the Tottenham fans next week, you're going to cry like a baby next week, and the week after, and after that, every week you're going to cry. I'm telling you, you're going to cry. Oh,
whew.
that's my weeping
Intensity.
What are the Tottenham people, Fletch? The Bushers. Bushers, I tell you.
Boy, I'll tell you, that London audience is going to be – is Tottenham of London?
Tottenham's of London.
It is.
How the hell do you have 30 major teams in a country that less than California's size?
Amazing.
They love their footy.
They love the footy. They do love the footy. But there's none. I've gotten my pennant. I've gotten my Champions League final ball, okay? And I'm waiting. I've cut out a place there for the championship thing. Fletch, you're going to have to come over to see the unveiling of the Champions League champion. And then on our show the week of the 1st, what are you going to sing?
I will be singing You'll Never Walk Alone.
Never Walk Alone.
That's right.
Google that on YouTube because you're going to goosebump, I tell you. You're goosebumping when you see it after that game. I'm crying right now. Worse than when Fletcher apologized for calling me nose for 40 years, making me put it on my Playboy shirt. I had to put. I was the number one with the nose written apart. What the hell?
Thought about that.
Bitter than on sports. That's all I can say.
It is.
You're gonna get quite a following in Britain, Dave. People who teach.
I'm gonna be bitter.
You're gonna be a lightning rod.
Lightning rod. I like that.
You'll be a lightning rod over there.
I'm lightheaded now after that.
You know, if you need mouth to mouth, you are gonna die. Just so you know.
You know, Viv's in the other room, and I think she'd agree with you.
I'll send you some of those steroids via Federal Express.
Please, if you could, have Patty hook me up.
Yeah, we'll send you some of those nasal steroids.
I'm willing to miss 50 games this year with the Pirates.
Hey, Dave, the thing that amazed me, you know, and you know I'm not much of a soccer fan. I'm going to join you in watching some of this. The fact that Liverpool team lost one game, that's just pristine.
That is
at that level of athlete. That's amazing.
They tied. Unfortunately, they tied too many games. What a race that was. And you got to give Man City credit, even though they cheated horribly.
Well, that's not a bitter thing to say at all.
Even though they cheated horribly, you give them credit because they did win 14 games in a row at the end of the season to do that. They won their last 14 games in a Baltimore Oriole-like maneuver towards the end of the season.
But we know what happened to that Orioles team when it counted, don't we?
And Man City, are they going to win the greatest championship in the world? Yeah.
No, sir. What are they going to be doing?
Lost in the quarterfinals. Exactly. So you can have your little trophy. You can have your little celebration. Okay? We're the champions of Europe. Okay? Much bigger than your little England. Okay? All right? Big Europe, England. Europe, England. Okay? All right? So take your cheating ways and go to hell. Okay?
Dave, are we taking callers next week? Because you better get up on your Cockney accent too in the English. You're gonna get some calls next week.
Working, man. Working them. I'll have another prediction in there just to slide one in, but it's going to be that prediction again. Guaranteed. What's today? The 14th? What do we got? 16, 17,
17 days.
2 weeks of this. You got 2 weeks to hear this, Tottenham people. Mama's boys, okay? All right?
Wankers, Dave.
Wankers, exactly. Oh.
Got me interested just because of the passion behind this there.
You're going to be more than interested. So
got me interested. Yeah, got me interested. I mean, I will say the crowd passion, the intensity of the crowd passion.
Well, if I'm going, you are coming up, and I'm going to tell you where you're going to watch the game, okay? You don't even have a choice.
Yes, sir.
All right?
Yes, sir.
You know, the other thing that's always great is seeing the crowd singing the songs.
Unbelievable. Exactly. It's like a college game, like a small college game.
Unbelievable.
I'm telling you,
at least 70,000 drunken people somewhere in that.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously had a lot of fun beforehand, but it is amazing. It really is. I mean, in the other sports there, they don't do that. They don't do that in the rugby or anything.
No. I'm telling you, if you get the chance, get it on YouTube. It is a goosebump moment seeing that, and then the coach and the players just are looking up in amazement and just get together and start singing it with them. And it's an amazing moment. It really is.
I mean, 3-0
It's going to be more amazing on the first.
3-0 comebacks in that are almost unheard of.
It's impossible.
Right? At that level. It's almost that level of athlete in that. It's almost never happens.
Now, to Tottenham's point, they did score 3 goals in the second half to do the same thing, but they did it against the baby team from the Netherlands, not the greatest team in Europe. Okay, so have your 3 goals, okay, against the team who was playing over their head. All right, we're gonna kick your ass, kicking your ass. Okay.
All right.
Intimidated?
Brush up on your UK accent, Dave, for when the calls start coming.
Yeah, just get a red shirt and you go where I tell you, okay?
The first call will be coming from Mom on the right.
Well, maybe she's from New Jersey and can go to Cape May to watch the game. Okay, I haven't ruled out you driving up there yet, Fletch. All right.
I am interested just because of the sheer passion in it. So
you'll see passion, my friend.
I see it.
All right, gentlemen. Until next week, Double Nuts 5. Please feel better, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you. Glad I made it. So glad I made it. Thank you.
You got it.